My mother-in-law, Linda, told me flat out that I was not part of their family just before we were all set to leave for a vacation. My husband and I ended up ditching them at the airport and heading off on our own adventure instead. A few days ago, I was gearing up to go on a family vacation with my husband James's relatives. Every year, his family has this big tradition where they all choose a destination, clear their schedules for a week, and take off together. James, 30 years old, and I, also 30, got married recently, though we had been dating for 3 years before that. Naturally, I was excited to finally be part of this big annual event for the first time. The year before, while we were still engaged, James had invited me to join the family vacation. But since no one from his family had extended the invitation, I felt a bit awkward about it and declined. This time, however, his mom, Linda, personally asked me to come along. That felt like a pretty big deal, considering Linda had never really warmed up to me. She was not openly rude or anything, but she always kept me at arm's length. She seemed polite enough on the surface, but I could feel the distance. There was this chill in her attitude whenever it came to me, like I just was not part of her world. Looking back, I think things started getting frosty when James moved out of their house to live with me. That is when her behavior began to shift. It was subtle at first, but I could sense the change. It was like she blamed me for him leaving the family nest, even though he was a grown man making his own choices. Of course, she did not say it outright, but her disapproval seeped through in little ways, no matter how much she tried to mask it. I have always been an independent person. I moved out of my parents' home as soon as I started college and never looked back. So, the idea of moving in with James's family, or anyone's family, was completely out of the question. That was just not how I pictured my life. I made that clear from the start when James and I talked about moving in together. He understood and agreed with me, and that was all that mattered. James had actually been thinking about moving out even before we started dating, but his mom had this strong preference for keeping the family close. She liked everyone living under the same roof or at least nearby so they could get together on weekends or even more often. She had succeeded in making that happen so far. James's older sister, Rachel, for example, had moved out when she got married, but she and her family lived just down the street. They were over at Linda's house practically every other day. I think Linda expected James to follow the same pattern, but he wanted something different. He told me that growing up in a house with no privacy made him crave his own space. He was happy with our setup, living a little farther away, and so was I. But I am pretty sure Linda saw me as the reason he did not stay closer, and that is probably why she was not too fond of me. Despite all this, I had done my best to be friendly and blend in with his family. I went out of my way to make things work, even though it was not always easy. Still, it seemed like no matter what I did, it was never quite enough. A few days before the trip, Linda sat me down for a talk. She said she wanted to discuss some details about the vacation, so I went over to her place while James was busy wrapping up work. I thought we were going to finalize plans or something, but instead, she dropped a bombshell. She told me that since this was a family vacation, and she and her husband always paid for the whole trip, they would not be covering my expenses. Apparently, they did not see me as family yet because they felt like they did not know me well enough. I was completely blindsided. It was not even about the money, I can pay my way, but the timing and the way she said it felt so cruel. We had been planning this trip for months, and I had been involved in everything. Now, just a day before we were supposed to leave, she hits me with this? To make matters worse, she told me that the reason she did not see me as part of the family was that I did not visit them often enough. She compared me to her son-in-law, who apparently made an effort to spend a lot of time with them. I could not believe it. After all the effort I had put in to be included, this was what I got? I kept my cool and told her I understood. I said I would pay for myself, but inside, I was heartbroken. She seemed surprised by how calm I was, like she had expected me to argue or get upset. I left soon after that and went straight home. When I got home, I told James everything. He was furious. He wanted to cancel the whole trip right then and there. He said he did not want to spend another second with his mother after the way she had treated me. That was when I finally told him about all the little things I had noticed, the coldness, the subtle digs, how her attitude had changed after he moved in with me. Hearing it all laid out, he admitted that it made sense. He said his mom had always been big on family and had been upset when he moved farther away, but he had never connected it to how she treated me. Even though Linda never outright admitted it, I had this strong feeling she blamed me for James moving out of their house and still held that against me. It made sense when I thought about how her attitude toward me had changed. Still, that did not give her an excuse to be so mean and try to embarrass me right before we left for the trip. I felt awful that day, and as James and I talked about it, we agreed that simply canceling the vacation and confronting her would not be enough. I wanted Linda to feel just as hurt as I did. That is when we came up with a plan. We decided to show up at the airport as if nothing was wrong, but instead of flying to Miami with them, we would book a flight to a completely different destination and leave them behind. By the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late. It was the kind of petty but satisfying idea that felt like justice. The next day, we stuck to the plan. We met James's family at the airport, acting perfectly normal. We even said we wanted to take a couple of pictures before boarding. No one suspected a thing, they were too busy chatting among themselves. Quietly, we headed to a ticket counter and bought the first available flight to a destination we both liked. San Francisco it was. Within a couple of hours, we were on a plane, heading west for our own little getaway. I have to say, it was such a relief to get away from all the drama. We were supposed to go to Miami with his family, but I liked this better. It was just the two of us, no one judging me or treating me like an outsider. Of course, it did not take long for James's family to figure out something was off. By the time we were seated on the plane, our phones were blowing up with calls and texts. We ignored every single one of them. Luckily, airports are chaotic enough that they never found us before our flight took off. Once we landed in San Francisco, James decided to address the situation. He sent a message in the family group chat, explaining exactly why we had ditched them. He told them about how Linda had said I was not family and how hurtful that had been. He explained that we decided to step back out of respect for her wishes since, according to her, this was supposed to be a family vacation. We expected Linda to be upset, maybe James's dad too, but we did not anticipate the entire family turning against us. Everyone was mad. They said we had worried them sick and called us selfish for leaving without telling anyone. They were furious that we had left them wondering where we were instead of just telling them up front. What shocked me the most was how much blame they threw at me. They said Linda's comment was not a big enough deal to warrant us leaving and that I had overreacted. Some of them even said it was my fault for assuming they would pay for me. They brought up how I had not made enough effort to join their family dinners or keep in touch as often as everyone else did. Apparently, they all had this unspoken expectation that I should have been more involved, and since I was not, they felt justified in Linda's behavior. To me, this was insulting. I am fully capable of supporting myself, and I would never expect someone else to pay my way. For them to suggest I was using them or taking advantage of their generosity was absurd. I told them their expectations were unreasonable. They claimed they only met for dinner weekly, but it was really every other day. James and I both worked full-time, and the idea of driving to their house that often was exhausting. We had tried to compromise by visiting every week or two, but apparently, that was not good enough. I reminded them of all the effort I had made over the years. I had done my best to fit in and get along with them, but if that still was not enough, then there was not much more I could do. Their anger only grew, and they accused us of being immature and ruining their vacation. Am I the asshole for choosing to vacation with my husband instead of his family? Edit, I need to address something because a lot of people are accusing me of isolating James from his family. That is a heavy accusation, and it could not be further from the truth. This was not just my idea. James and I both agreed that his family's expectations were excessive. No one needs to have family meals every other day. If that is how they want to live, fine, but that does not work for us. James had grown up feeling smothered by their constant closeness, and he wanted to create some distance. Moving farther away and limiting our visits to once a week was a mutual decision. It was not something I forced on him. It is unfair that his family and even some people here are blaming me for it. As for the accusation that I felt entitled to their money or their vacation, that is also untrue. If they had been upfront from the start and told me I needed to pay for myself, I would have either agreed or stayed home. But Linda blindsiding me the day before the trip felt deliberate, like she wanted to put me in my place. That was what hurt the most, not the money, but the way it was done. I would never expect them to pay for me without question, and I resent the implication that I did. James and I made this decision together, and we stand by it. At the end of the day, we are prioritizing our own peace, even if it means upsetting his family. She called me a lunatic and accused me of trying to ruin her family. She declared that she had come to save her son, Mark, before I brainwashed him completely. According to her, I had no right to interfere in their lives because, as she put it, I was not family. I just could not help myself. I shot back, "Well, I am glad not to be part of your family because it seems like you are more interested in running a cult than just having a normal family." That was all it took for Linda to snap. Her face turned red, and before I knew it, she lunged at me like a wild animal. She grabbed my hair, yanking at it, and started screaming insults at me. I froze for a moment, shocked, but Mark was quick to pull her off me. He forced her toward the door, but she was not done. Even as she stood outside on the porch, she was yelling all kinds of awful things at me, words so vile that I cannot even repeat them. I stood there shaking, trying to calm down, while Mark called the police. Linda refused to leave and kept pacing around the front yard, shouting about how I was tearing their family apart and how she would not let me win. It was only when the police finally arrived that she stopped yelling. Her tone changed immediately, and she started pleading with us not to press charges. But it was too late. Mark and I had made up our minds. She had crossed the line, physically attacking me, and I could not just let it go. If I did, what would stop her from doing it again? So, we pressed charges. Since I was not seriously hurt, I figured she would not face much more than a slap on the wrist. Still, I wanted there to be a record of what had happened. When the officers took her away, Linda was crying hysterically, which was almost funny considering how full of rage she had been just moments earlier. Once she was gone, Mark and I sat down and started talking about the next steps. We agreed that we needed a restraining order against her. It was clear she was unstable, and I did not want to risk her coming back to cause more trouble. We also decided it was time to move. Mark had been considering relocating anyway because our current place was not very convenient for his work. Now, we had an even better reason to get out of there and make a fresh start in a place where Linda and the rest of his family could not reach us. A couple of hours after Linda was taken into custody, we were still waiting to hear from his family. No one had reached out yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. They would probably be furious, and they might even cut Mark off completely. But honestly, it was worth it. Linda needed to be held accountable for her actions, and I have no regrets about standing up to her. Update 3. We managed to get a restraining order against Linda, and it has been a few days since everything went down. The past 2 weeks have been an absolute whirlwind for Mark and me. Between the legal stuff, looking for a new home, and dealing with the fallout from his family, it has been a lot to handle. First off, Linda got off with just community service since I was not badly hurt. That did not stop Mark's family from making a huge scene about it, though. They have been spreading all kinds of nonsense, trying to make Linda look like the victim. They even went as far as claiming that I had provoked her on purpose to get her in trouble. Somehow, they have twisted the story to make me out to be the bad guy, even though I was the one who got attacked. Thankfully, most people are not buying it. A lot of Mark's extended family and friends have been supportive of us, which has been a relief. Still, it is exhausting dealing with the drama. Mark has essentially cut ties with his immediate family over this, and honestly, I think it is for the best. Being around them was suffocating for him, and now he feels like he can finally breathe. I stand by what I said about Linda's behavior. She was not running a family, she was running a cult. Her expectations were unreasonable, and the way she treated me was downright toxic. I am glad I finally called her out on it, and if I ever have to do it again, I will not hesitate. That said, I do not think we will be crossing paths anytime soon. With the restraining order in place and the fact that we moved to a new house last week, she has no way of finding us. We also blocked everyone in his family on social media, so there is no way for them to contact us online. For the first time in years, it feels like we have some real peace. Mark has told me more than once how relieved he feels. He has always said that growing up in such a controlling environment made him crave independence, but it was hard for him to take that step while still being so tied to his family. Now, he feels free, and I am so happy for him. As for me, I feel incredibly grateful for my own family. They have always respected my boundaries and given me the space I needed to grow. Having that kind of support has made all the difference, and I am glad Mark and I can build something similar together.